We would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet to share these conversations on the Vegan Compass podcast.
We extend our respect to elders past and present, as well as any of our listeners and guests. Hello and welcome to the Vegan Compass podcast, unveiling truths, inspiring change. We are your hosts, Rick Allport and Mackenzie Cross.
From wherever you're listening, please be sure to like and subscribe to support this podcast. Now to the episode.
Welcome to the news of the week on the Vegan Compass podcast. I'm Rick Allport, and today I'm here with my co-host, Mackenzie Cross. We've got 10 stories on the radar, ranging from the appalling gimmick of painting dogs to look like tigers, to the relentless push to ban rodeos, to a legal triumph in France that's allowing plant-based foods to reclaim terms like bacon and steak. There's a lot to cover, some of it heartbreaking, some of it hopeful, but we're here to unpack it in our usual candid and compassionate style.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. We'll be discussing distressing cases of animal exploitation, but we'll also celebrate the uplifting victories for animal rights and plant-based living. This is a safe space for all who care about animals, the environment, and a kinder future. Let's jump right into it. So get comfortable and we'll get started.
All right, let's dive into our first story of the day. We're looking at a zoo in China that came under fire for painting chow chows to resemble tigers. Yes, you heard that right. Actually dyeing dogs black and orange to pass them off as big cats. It's not the first time this zoo has pulled a stunt like this. Last year they reportedly dyed dogs to look like pandas.
It's absolutely mind-boggling that some zoos resort to these cheap tricks just to draw in more visitors. We're talking about animals reduced to props in what amounts to nothing more than a gimmick. And let's be real, even if they use dyes that they claim are safe, this has nothing to do with genuine education or conservation. Two things zoos often claim they stand for.
Exactly. It shows a fundamental disregard for the welfare and the dignity of the animals involved. It's not about teaching people the importance of protecting endangered species. It's about entertainment, plain and simple. And to me, that just highlights the bigger problem with zoos in general. Even if this were a rare incident, it's another reminder that animals in captivity are being exploited for profit, or in this case, a wow factor that just ends up being insulting to the animals.
I agree. It's disheartening to see how these facilities will twist the narrative to justify their actions, comparing dyeing a dog's fur to humans dyeing their own hair, for instance. There's a stark difference between humans choosing to alter their appearance and forcing an animal into a situation they have no say in. Hopefully, the public outrage keeps the pressure on zoos. The more people speak out, the closer we get to closing down these facilities.
And moving on to yet another bleak reminder of the cruelty and danger animals face when they're held captive for entertainment. We have a mermaid performer in a Chinese aquarium, literally swimming around with large fish, including sturgeon that can grow up to 20 feet long. In the video, you can see a sturgeon fish creep up and clamp down on her head, wounding her before she manages to break free.
It's horrifying for the performer, but let's step back and consider the bigger issue. These fish are confined to a tank for human amusement. Sturgeons and other aquatic animals have no business being used in circus-like stunts. And when you keep wild animals trapped in these unnatural spaces, you create stress, anxiety, and unpredictable situations for both the animals and the humans forced to interact with them.
Exactly. Aquariums often tout their educational value, but let's be honest, this sort of show is about spectacle, not science. The notion that these places provide clean and high standards of living for the animals is just marketing spin. If you pay attention, you'll see so many fish in aquariums exhibiting repetitive behaviours, banging against the glass or endlessly pacing their limited environment, clear signs of chronic stress and psychological harm.
Meanwhile, the aquarium tried to bury the whole story. The performer who got attacked was reportedly forced back to work soon after, offered a laughably small compensation, and told to keep quiet. It just shows how these facilities prioritize profit over the needs of the animals and even employee safety.
Facilities like these aren't about genuinely respecting or conserving marine life. They're about turning animals into money-making exhibits. We can't let flashy shows and clever marketing overshadow the ethical issues. It's a grim cycle. Animals trapped in cramped enclosures, put on display, forced to coexist with performers. When something goes wrong, the narrative almost always shifts to blaming the animal for being aggressive, and that is just not okay.
Hopefully, stories like this will continue to open people's eyes to the inherent cruelty behind aquariums and similar attractions. Real education and conservation efforts should respect animals in their natural habitats, not confine them for ticket sales.
And now to a rodeo in Yarra Valley. This event was hailed as a big success, but the RSPCA raised serious concerns about the welfare of the animals involved. Frankly, from my perspective, there's no question. Rodeos are extremely cruel. These animals are subjected to fear, pain, and stress purely for entertainment, and honestly, it needs to stop.
I can't agree more. Rodeos aren't just a little rough around the edges, they systematically exploit animals who have no say in being there. Calves are roped at just 4 months old, bucking broncos and bulls are tormented, and the injuries can be brutal. Fractures, ligament damage, bruises, you name it. It's all for a crowd's thrill.
And it's not just physical injuries. These animals are prey species. They naturally mask pain and fear. And yet you can see them bellow. You can see their facial expressions, their obvious distress when the rope snaps around their neck or they're spurred relentlessly. Every sign points to extreme suffering.
While the RSPCA calls out this cruelty, and don't get me wrong, that's valuable, they still give a pass to the very same sort of suffering that occurs every day in animal agriculture. They're all for preventing cruelty, yet time and time again they're seen supporting barbecues with dead animals or slapping an RSPCA approved stamp on farming practices that still confine, mutilate, and slaughter animals.
Yeah, there's definitely a disconnect. It's a glaring double standard. Criticise cruelty in rodeos, but remain silent or complicit when it comes to the cruelty of the meat, dairy, and egg industry. How can you claim to protect animals if you're literally serving them up at a fundraising barbecue?
Exactly. If the organisation's core mission is the prevention of cruelty to animals, it can't pick and choose which animals deserve that protection. Rodeos are horrifying, yes, but so is the routine slaughter of cows, pigs, chickens, and others. It's time for consistency and real action to end all these abusive practices.
Well said. Rodeos are a piece of a much larger puzzle of normalised animal exploitation. It's important we keep pushing back, because when we see cruelty, we've got to call it out, whether it's in a rodeo arena or behind the closed doors of a factory farm. All right, let's move on to some brighter news in our fourth story. This one's a major triumph for the vegan food industry in France, where their highest administrative court, the Council of State, has just struck down a ban that would have barred plant-based products from using terms like steak, ham, and bacon. It's a massive win for companies like Beyond Meat and La Vie, and for consumer choice in general.
It really is. For a while, French lawmakers tried to push this narrative that calling something vegan bacon was somehow misleading or confusing to consumers. But study after study shows that shoppers know exactly what they're buying when they pick up plant-based products. This ruling essentially says, let's not create imaginary confusion or punish brands for using familiar terms.
We see a trend globally where certain groups attempt to restrict how vegan products are labelled, claiming they trick people. The reality is your average consumer isn't going to accidentally pick up soy nuggets thinking they're chicken nuggets. They know what they're getting, something that's lower in saturated fat, free from animal exploitation, and better for the environment.
As the court's Advocate General pointed out, these proposed bans weren't based on solid evidence. They were not fit for purpose. Meanwhile, real issues like climate change, public health, and genuine consumer misinformation get swept aside in the scramble to stifle the growing plant-based market.
It's almost like there's a vested interest in making it harder for people to access and understand vegan options. But this ruling underlines that we need open, honest labeling, and it proves that fear-mongering doesn't hold up in court.
This victory sets a strong precedent for other countries eyeing similar bans, showing that transparent plant based labels aren't misleading. I hope it paves the way for more widespread acceptance and makes it easier for consumers to find vegan products.
Couldn't agree more. Here's to winning battles not just in France, but everywhere the plant-based industry faces outdated legal roadblocks. Here is some great science to follow up that story. We're looking at some truly game-changing news on the health benefits of plant-based meats. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition points to 4 major improvements, like a 6% drop in total cholesterol, a 12% drop in LDL or bad cholesterol, modest weight loss, and an overall boost in cardiometabolic health. That's in just 8 weeks.
I love seeing actual data backing up what many of us in the vegan community have been saying for years. These plant based products, especially those made with mycoprotein, are really shaking things up. We're talking about heart health benefits, a lower environmental footprint than animal based products, and of course, zero animal exploitation.
And what's really cool is this study looked at modern meat alternatives that aim to mimic taste and texture. So it's not just tofu and beans. There's nothing wrong with tofu, but these plant-based meat alternative products cater to folks who want that familiarity. So if you're worried about giving up the taste, these innovations can help make the transition a whole lot easier.
Exactly. Between these health studies and consumer demand skyrocketing, it's no wonder we're seeing A-list celebrities and pro athletes endorsing plant-based alternatives. Ultimately, this is all about empowering people to make the transition in a way that feels sustainable for them. This study is a great example that you can improve your health without compromising on taste or convenience while making positive changes for the animals and the environment.
I'd say that's a massive win for vegan food. Remember, not all brands are created equal, so check those labels for protein content, sodium levels, and other additives. But honestly, this is fantastic news for anyone looking to dip their toes into plant-based eating. The next story is a real bummer for all you sweet tooth vegans out there. Nestle is discontinuing their vegan Kit Kat, citing low demand. They'll keep it in the UK and Ireland for a while, but eventually it's getting phased out there too.
It's pretty disappointing, especially since the non-vegan Kit Kats seem to be on sale constantly. You can't walk into a supermarket without seeing them discounted. Meanwhile, the vegan version almost never went on special, which probably didn't help its chances of survival.
If you're going to introduce a plant-based product, at least give it the same promotional push as its conventional counterpart. Otherwise, of course, sales aren't going to stack up. And let's not forget, Nestle doesn't have the greatest track record when it comes to animal welfare or product testing. Their name has come up in numerous controversies over the years.
That's the thing. They talk about net zero by 2050 and sustainable cocoa practices, but they've also faced a whole lot of backlash on ethical grounds. Yes, it's great that they're at least acknowledging the need for more sustainable sourcing, but it feels contradictory to discontinue something cruelty-free while pushing conventional chocolate that contributes to the exploitation in the dairy industry, not to mention the environmental impact.
Exactly. If Nestle were truly committed to leading on sustainability and really addressing animal welfare, then making plant-based Kit Kat accessible, including reasonable pricing and promotions, should be part of that.
Here's hoping other brands will step up to fill that gap. Consumers clearly want ethical, delicious vegan chocolate, and I think we'll see more of it coming from smaller companies who actually prioritize animal welfare and sustainability across the board.
Our next story shines a spotlight on crocodile leather. Yes, the so-called exotic skin the fashion labels still parade around as luxury item. There are about 130,000 farm crocodiles across northern Australia, raised in conditions that can only be described as horrific. They're viewed as commodities, imprisoned and slaughtered, so their skins can become handbags and belts.
What's really troubling is how the industry tries to spin this as sustainable. They claim it helps with conservation by giving local communities financial incentives, Yet the bottom line is still that animals are being exploited for profit. It's a classic example of greenwashing. We're saving crocodiles by farming them. In reality, they're just fueling a cycle of profit driven captivity and killing.
And it's not just the crocodiles themselves that suffer. Look at how they're being bred in mass numbers and slaughtered at younger and younger ages because smaller skins can be used for smaller fashion accessories. It's all about churning out as many skins as possible to feed this so called high end market. We've seen this pattern before with fur, feathers, you name it.
In the wild, crocodiles can live for decades. On these farms, they're crammed into cramped enclosures and might be slaughtered at 2 years old. That's not conservation, that's a factory model, and it's morally indefensible. We're talking about sentient living beings. All of this just so some handbag can be labelled luxury.
In an uplifting spin, many major fashion outlets and events are finally phasing out exotic skins. David Jones, Melbourne Fashion Festival, even London Fashion Week. These are big names saying no more. They're realising that people are no longer buying the excuse that it's sustainable or humane.
That's great to hear, Rick. This is part of a bigger movement. Exploiting animals for a fashion statement is completely outdated and ethically bankrupt. Fashion trends change, and thankfully more consumers are seeing how outrageous it is to treat living beings like commodities. Of course, this is thanks to the relentless advocacy and exposure from animal protection organisations.
Spot on. If we can ban fur, which has been done in so many places, then banning crocodile leather should be next. Actually, the conversation should move toward ending all forms of animal exploitation. Enough is enough. And now we have yet another appalling story of animals forced into captivity for so-called human entertainment. This time it's dolphins at a luxury resort in Mexico near Cancun. From the video that's been circulating, you can actually see one of these dolphins misjudge the boundary of an insanely small tank and slam right into the edge. It's just devastating to watch.
This dolphin has reportedly died from their injuries. I can't wrap my head around how people still view these encounters as harmless fun. We're talking about a species meant to roam vast oceans, now confined to a tiny concrete pool that's practically a bathtub. Of course, something like this was bound to happen.
Dolphins are incredibly social, intelligent creatures who travel huge distances every day in the wild. Sticking them in a glorified fishbowl for tourists to hug or ride is beyond cruel. It's impossible for them to behave naturally or stay healthy in that environment. It's basically a prison for the entertainment of people shelling out a few extra dollars for a dolphin photo op.
And it's not like we don't know better by now. There's been a global outcry for years against these marine mammal shows. Look at how orca shows have been dropped in certain places. People are starting to catch on. But it's high time these swim with dolphin programs go the same way. They aren't educational, they aren't conservation focused, they're just money grabbing attractions that exploit sentient beings.
This has to end. We need to make it clear that profiting from keeping animals in cramped, unnatural conditions is unacceptable. These attractions should be shut down, plain and simple. And if we can't rely on the resorts to do the right thing, public pressure and boycotts can work wonders. We've seen it happen before, and we can make it happen again.
Exactly. If you care about animals, even a little, please don't support these programs. Don't buy tickets, don't post happy selfies, and don't help these places profit from misery. Until we all reject this form of exploitation, these dolphins and countless other animals remain trapped in these tiny prisons.
Okay, let's pivot to a more uplifting story. This one's all about a successful habitat restoration project in tropical North Queensland that's helping native tree kangaroos. Tourism Tropical North Queensland teamed up with several partners to plant a second hectare of Marby forest on the Atherton tablelands, and it's truly an inspiring collaboration.
Absolutely. It's not often we hear about the tourism industry going all in on genuine ecosystem restoration, but that's exactly what's happening here. They've planted over 3,000 trees in just one day, and those trees are projected to soak up more than 600 tonnes of carbon dioxide over the next 25 years. That's a major win for both the local environment and the climate.
And you've got to love the fact that it's not just a random PR stunt. They're really involving people from the industry. About 40 tourism representatives turned out to get their hands dirty. It's a hands on approach to conservation that benefits everyone. Tourists get to see the direct positive impact, and the reforestation effort helps critically endangered habitats like the Mauve forest, which only has about 4% of its original coverage left.
It's especially important for animals like the tree kangaroo, whose continued survival depends on having enough connected forest areas. Planting these trees helps combat habitat fragmentation, which is key to preserving biodiversity and genetic health among these animals. And as the article mentions, there's even a chance visitors might spot one of these adorable creatures in the newly planted areas.
They're really showing how tourism and conservation can go hand in hand. By giving visitors and industry members a tangible way to offset carbon emissions and directly restore habitats, they're creating this beautiful cycle. Tourism funds conservation. Conservation attracts more eco-conscious visitors, and the region's natural wonders are preserved for future generations.
It's a great reminder that there are good news stories out there. It's not all doom and gloom. When groups come together, local businesses, conservation organisations, the tourism sector, they can make a meaningful impact on endangered species and delicate ecosystems. This is proof that positive change is possible when people collaborate and take responsibility for their environmental footprint.
Couldn't have said it better, Mackenzie. With all the dire news we've covered so far, it's fantastic to see a success story like this. Let's keep this energy going and support initiatives that protect wildlife and restore natural habitats. All right, folks, we've reached our final story. Thankfully, we get to end on a truly uplifting note. January 2025 has broken all records, with a staggering 25.8 million people worldwide giving a plant-based diet a try in January. That's not just a small group of dedicated vegans anymore. That's a massive global community coming together to see what happens when they cut out animal products, even for just 1 month.
Absolutely phenomenal. And it's not just the numbers that are impressive, it's how many new places are getting involved. Veganuary has expanded to Canada, Peru, and Malaysia this year, teaming up with local partner organisations. So it's not just people in, say, the UK or the US, it's a movement that truly transcends borders. Everywhere you look, people are giving veganism a go.
Yeah, and on top of that, they're launching a sister campaign in China called V-March, Manchun Sanyu, I think that's how you pronounce it, which will run for 31 days next month. It's basically Veganuary adapted to the Lunar New Year period, which is such a brilliant move. January is not always a convenient time for everyone, especially in cultures where the New Year celebrations are a huge deal.
Right, and it's heartening to see over 50 businesses in China already committed to V-March. They're launching and promoting plant-based products to align with the campaign. It's exactly the kind of synergy we need. When local businesses jump on board, it makes it easier for the average person to try vegan options without too much hassle.
And let's be real, celebrity endorsements definitely help. This year, Veganuary had the support from the likes of Woody Harrelson, Pamela Anderson, Bethany Antona, and Levi Roots, among others. It's not just about star power, but about how these big names can reach audiences who might not otherwise consider trying a vegan diet. It bridges that gap between curiosity and action.
Certainly, and they're all sharing recipes and tips, making it less intimidating for newcomers. I love seeing that inclusive, non judgmental approach. You've got people from different walks of life, celebrities, athletes, TV presenters, each giving their unique spin on how a plant based lifestyle can be both accessible and meaningful.
And this approach is so effective. Veganuary's head of communications, Tony Vanelli, pointed out that one reason this campaign is growing globally is because people are connecting the dots between climate change, health, and of course, animal rights. Yet Veganuary keeps it positive. Just try it for a month, see how you feel, no strings attached. That's the beauty of it.
Totally. It's an invitation rather than a lecture. And the fact that 25.8 million people accepted that invitation this year is testament to a major shift in how the world views diet. Plant-based eating has moved out of the fringe and into the mainstream. That benefits not just the animals, who are spared from slaughter, but also the planet. With every new participant, you have a potential lifelong convert or at least someone who's more mindful about their food choices.
And that mindfulness tends to ripple outward. You try veganuary, maybe you discover some new recipes you love, and that curiosity can lead you to keep going beyond January. Or maybe you cut down on animal products the rest of the year. Even small changes add up, especially when millions of people are doing it.
Plus, with the rise of these parallel campaigns like VMarch, we're going to see even more cultural adaptation that respects local traditions and holidays. China has an incredibly rich culinary history with plant centered dishes, so the potential for growth there is massive. And if all goes well, we could see this model replicated elsewhere, fitting vegan challenges around different cultural events all over the world.
It's incredibly exciting. Hearing about stuff like this gives me so much hope after some of the harder hitting stories we've covered today. It's a reminder that yes, there's a lot of work to be done to tackle animal exploitation, but there's also a ton of momentum behind this movement, and it's building faster than ever.
Couldn't agree more. In the midst of rodeos, zoos painting dogs like tigers, and aquariums forcing dolphins to perform, seeing millions of people trying a plant based lifestyle is the best possible finale to our episode. There really is reason to believe things are changing for the better.
And on that truly positive note, that wraps up our final story. Veganuary's record breaking success shows just how powerful collective action can be. If you haven't tried going plant based yet, maybe give it a shot. After all, if 25.8 million people can do it, why not you?
And that wraps up this week's episode of the Vegan Compass podcast. We hope these 10 stories have fueled your passion for creating a kinder, more equitable world for all sentient beings.
So let's keep this momentum going. Advocate for animals, introduce friends and family to vegan options, speak up against exploitation, and continue to educate yourself. We're all a part of this growing movement, and together we can build a future where no animal suffers for human convenience.
Absolutely. Stay strong, stay committed, your choices matter, and they ripple out in ways you might never even see. The more we push forward, the closer we get to a truly vegan world.
Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to follow us on social media for updates, discussions, and ways to get involved. Remember, a bit of compassion you show today shapes a better tomorrow.
Until next time, this is the Vegan Compass podcast, unveiling truths, inspiring change. Keep your hearts open, your voices loud, and as always, stay vegan.
Take care, everyone. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Vegan Compass podcast, unveiling truths, inspiring change.
Be sure to follow us on social media at the Vegan Compass _podcast. See you next time.